Welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're well. First weekly update of February. It's February already. We are moving along, and things are happening, and that's great. It's warming up everywhere. Hopefully, the cold weather is over, and the kind of post-Christmas malaise is well and truly gone, and we can start focusing on the new year. A couple of interesting things to talk through this week. I would say not a hugely busy week, probably, I think, although there are a couple of kind of key announcements, including something that I completely missed from last month. Last month actually, that is worth talking through, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about because I think it's really interesting. But let's start at the beginning. And we've got some changes to the Microsoft Graph API, specifically the Teams APIs for meetings, for recording meetings. So Microsoft Graph has some API calls in it that you can use to get the recordings of Teams meetings. So when a Teams meeting is recorded, you can then programmatically go into the API afterwards and pull up and download like an MP4 of the recording, just like you can in the client, but this is like a programmatic way to do it. So if you wanted like an application to go along afterwards and download the recording and store it somewhere, maybe outside of Teams, or analyze it, do some AI stuff on it, take the transcript out, look for sentiment, you could do lots and lots of different things in it. Anyway, there's APIs for doing that. They've been in beta for quite a while now. This announcement that came last week is about them going into GA. There's a couple of things. There's a whole blog post about it, and there's a couple of things I just kind of want to go into because it's interesting. So the first one is, so I'm going to call out this sentence here. So off the bat, this is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. However, channel meetings are not yet supported. So what does that mean? It means that if you schedule calendar meetings for your Teams meetings, I think I would say that's the way that most people use Teams meetings today. They schedule them either in Outlook or they schedule them using the the calendar app in Teams. Those meetings will be recorded fine. I think as well that ad hoc meetings, so if you have a chat and you just kind of upscale it to video and then somebody decides to hit the record button, I think they get recorded in the same way as well. But channel meetings do not get recorded in this way. So channel meetings are not supported yet. What does that mean? In a channel, you can set up a meeting. The meeting lives in the channel. I really like those kind of things because actually, if it's a good use case is like a weekly catch up for the whole team, where the whole team lives in that channel and all the work gets done in that channel. I really like it because you can see the previous history of those, like right in the channel. If you are not in that meeting, you can see it start, you can see the chat, all within the channel. I think it's a really nice experience. Anyway, those are not supported in that API, which by itself is fine. However, I do think it's kind of disappointing that this API has been in beta for so long and now it's gone GA and it's still not supported, because fundamentally users don't really know the difference between the two. And if you're an ISV making some software that uses this API, or you're an enterprise that needs to pull down recordings for, because you're keeping a store somewhere, you can't have 80% of the meetings. You can't say this, just don't do channel meetings, everyone, or you can't enforce that stuff. So this has to be everything or it's nothing. And so I think it's a shame that it's kind of shipped all the way to GA when it's not fully what I would call feature complete. So that's one thing. So using it is kind of much the same as it was in beta. The meeting gets recorded and then you can go and list recordings if you've got that meeting ID, because you might have multiple recordings in a meeting, of course, and then you can pull down that recording as a MP4 file. You can also use change notifications to subscribe when new recordings become available. You can do that across all meetings in your tenant, apart from those channel meetings. So this is the problem, you see. If you want to be I want to record all meetings, it's not quite all meetings. Or you can do it on a specific meeting. You can still subscribe to recordings on a specific meeting, or you can subscribe to specific meetings for a specific user. So all meetings, for a specific user. So you can say, I want to record all the meetings that I create. And you can subscribe to that as well. The other thing to point out is this is a metered API. We've talked about metered APIs a lot last year. I'm not going to go over it again now. Just to let you know, though, it is a metered API. There is charge involved. So just be aware of the pricing. Look it up. There's a link to the pricing model at the bottom of the blog post. It's not free. All right, so that's that. The general availability of those recording APIs, just with that gotcha around them not being there for channel meetings. All right, I wasn't going to spend that long on that first thing, although I have, because I wanted to leave some time for this second thing, which was a really interesting blog post from the ACS team. Excuse me. Oh dear. A really interesting blog post from the ACS team talking about transitioning from Twilio programmable video to Azure Communication Services. And I sort of read the title and I thought, oh, that's punchy of the ACS team, putting out a blog post about how to move from a competing product, because Twilio programmable video performs a very similar function to a lot of the ACS voice over IP stuff and a lot of the video stuff as well. But actually, as I read the article, what jumped out to me, which I didn't realize, is that Twilio have actually recently announced that their programmable video API is going to be deprecated and they're getting rid of it, which for me is the much bigger news. I didn't know this at all. So first of all, there's a good blog post from the ACS team about how to move over from Twilio to ACS. So if you are a Twilio person who uses video, if you're a Twilio person and you don't know if your company uses video, go and find out, because they're getting rid of it. They're getting rid of it at the end of this year, so December the 5th, 24. And ACS is a great replacement that you should definitely check out. Twilio, of course, don't recommend it as a migration point. The places, so it's worth knowing, if you go and look at Twilio's announcements, they will recommend some alternatives. The alternatives they recommend are not competing in any of their other spaces. So, for instance, ACS is not listed because it competes in the SMS space. And so, just be aware of that, that what Twilio are recommending as the alternatives is not necessarily the full picture. And I think it's definitely worth you looking at Azure Communication Services here. Good blog post about moving over. And a migration guide, which is useful for anyone actually, about how the thing works, what the terminology is. I think if you're coming to this from Twilio, this is a great blog post because it sort of assumes you already know kind of what you're doing because you've done it once before, but it just lays out the terminology, what the different things in Azure are called, and some of that stuff. So, and what's possible and what you can do. So I think that's a good blog post by itself. But Twilio getting rid of video is really interesting because for me, I thought video was going to be, is where it's going, right? If you look at the evolution of, we've had SMS, we've had voice, we're seeing a lot of voice over IP replacing traditional PSTN, and video is like the next obvious step, especially on websites and things like that for people to talk to each other. I think it gets way more decentralized. We're seeing, certainly in Europe, WhatsApp is huge, but more and more I feel like video is going to become commodity around services. So you're going to see it alongside other services, and it's not going to be a thing that you go to a separate application for. If you look at what Teams is doing with IM, they're trying to make it so communication isn't a thing you need a separate application for, which was always the kind of the goal with all the way back to Skype for Business and OCS, is you don't have to turn away between, looking at the computer and looking at the phone. You're bringing those worlds together. And I feel like video, embed, or, WebRTC, and all that stuff is the next evolution of that, bringing it onto the places that we already kind of take our content from and make our interactions, so like websites and apps and things like that. So I think it's interesting Twilio are getting out of it. I don't know why. It might just be a rationalization. The last couple of years, lots of big tech companies have had to make rationalizations. This might just be theirs. Or, maybe it's not working out for them. Maybe it's too crowded. It is a busy space now. Amazon have just come in as well, back end of last year, by putting video into their Connect infrastructure. So it's an interesting one to watch. But yeah, no, I thought it was interesting. All right, we're already way over time. So let's try and wrap it up with one more thing to tell you about. which is not so much for developers actually, but it is good for Microsoft Teams IT folk, and that is a bulk installer for Windows. So this is for new teams. So I don't like this terminology of new teams, old teams, but like what Microsoft are calling new teams, the thing that is rolling out and replacing classic teams everywhere, and is currently, it's still kind of, you've still got the choice between old teams and new teams. So you may be on one or the other. If you're an IT person and you want to move your enterprise over to new teams in bulk, then you can do that with a bulk installer now. And there's a couple of different ways you can do it. The blog post goes into detail. There's the kind of like least effort on your part, which is to just run it and it will pull it down from online. But you can also do an offline deployment if you've got a large estate and you're worried about everybody showing up at 9 a.m. and drawing down the Teams installer, which is, there's a way to do that off like a network share or anything like that, a local system, whatever. You can also use it to bulk remove, so that might be worth looking at if you've got a if you put out an instance and then you need to bring it back in. So this is all good. You've got lots of choices there, and the blog post goes into all the detail. So more for the IT admins, but if you know an IT admin, just tell them this exists if they're moaning about the lack of a bulk installer of Microsoft Teams. All right, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about this week. Kind of an interesting week. Look out for a blog post from me this week about some speaking stuff that is coming up, because conferences are starting up again in the new year, which is exciting. And whatever else it is you're doing this week, I hope you have a really good one, and I will speak to you again next time.